Breaking Out of an Enslaved Mind is the subtitle of the first article that I wanted to discuss here. It's on this morning's newsletter that goes out right before the show. It says, "This morning, as I perused my different social media accounts, I came across a story that has so many meanings as it explains the current state that we are in today. A girl went to her class very, very happy. She was really happy as she entered her class because this is a class that she loved. The professor of that class has always been nice, showed a much concern for all the students. I mean, he was there for them, answering questions, backslapping. They love him. You know, it's like you have that teacher that everybody loves, that professor that everybody loves. On this particular day, the professor was in a bad mood, something uncharacteristic to him. He put all the desks in a circle surrounding his desk. And on his desk, there was a fishbowl with a goldfish in it. Now, as the kids sat down, he shouted to them as he never had before, that anyone who spoke out right now or beyond will fail the class today, or that anybody who got out of their chair for any reason would also fail the class today. He then took the goldfish out of the fishbowl and dropped it on the desk, and then he hurriedly left the classroom. Everybody in the class looked at each other with astonishment. Nobody said anything. Nobody spoke. Nobody did anything. This fish is slapping itself on the desk as it is trying to survive, trying to get some oxygen into the gill that it's not designed to breathe air, but pull air out of water. So this fish is dying. And these kids are sitting around. They're doing absolutely nothing. It's like they're paralyzed. They can't move because they're told not to move. They can't talk because they're told not to talk. They'll let that fish die because to save that fish means they'll have to get out of the chair, which means they'll move, which means they'll fail. One person in that class, una persona en esa sala, got up and said, to hell with this. I am not going to let that fish die. And she picked up that fish and she threw that fish into the water. Fish saved. The professor returned to the room with a simple comment. What have you allowed the system to do to you? It was an experiment. This explains how we have allowed our wealthy minority to rule us or build their wealth on our intellect. They built their wealth on our work. They built our wealth on our service as we were given pittance in return. This isn't my story. This is a story that just popped up on my TikTok account. By the way, everybody talking about TikTok and the Chinese trying to invade our privacy and all of that. That's all crap, okay? TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, they all take your data. They all take your location info. And it doesn't have to be a foreign company. And a foreign company doesn't mean you any less harm than our good old American company, because they're all capitalist companies, whether Chinese or Americans, trying to do one thing: make a dollar on you. So the big hoopla about the Chinese company and TikTok is nothing more than companies wanting to get rid of one of their competitors. Don't fall for it. All of them are extracting your data, extracting your motions, extracting your movement, extracting everything. You don't get into that fight. Oh, let's stop TikTok. Oh, let's stop Instagram. The truth of the matter is, all these guys are spying on you to learn what makes you tick, to try to make you tick. But going back to the subject at hand, my dear brothers and sisters, when I saw that this morning, I said to myself, what an encapsulation of who we have become. Or maybe who we always were, that ultimately needs to change. I think the latter is more accurate. Who we have always been. And the fear has always been that we would smarten up, that we will start asking the questions, that we will start saying, why do we allow the few to control the many? Why do we allow the few to take advantage of all our intellect, service, work? Because we are frozen. We were told that Jeff Bezos earned what he had somehow magically, that somehow all these wealthy people deserve what they have. We were told that the system that made it happen for them, that somehow it's innate in their character that allowed them that wherewithal to be that wealthy. And then you ask the question, when you start to get smart, when you start to loosen that chain, when you become that woman who decided to let that fish live, when you become that woman who made that fish live, who said, I am not going to fall into the trap of hurting others for that which commanded me immorally, right? You pick up that fish and you throw it into the fish tank. That is what, whenever I do politics done right, whenever I see other progressive programs on the airwaves that are not fearful of going against the grain, and sometimes telling folks, not because we have always done things this way, means it is the way that it should have been done or that we should do it. Again, let's remember something that is so very important. America was built by us. America was built by the common person. America was built by the slaves, by the Chinese who built the railroad across the continent, by the indigenous who taught many of the techniques to survive in this originally hostile land. All these were contributors to the building of America, and that a few monopolize on all the doings of everybody else, and that we have allowed that to continue decade after decade after decade after century after century after century. It's the results of an enslaved mindset. Was I ever of an enslaved mindset? Yes. Was my mind ever in chains? Yes. Or is my mind in chains now or enslaved now? Absolutely not. I see the entire picture as wide as one can see. And one of the things I made the promise to do was to tell everybody, number one of the first articles I wrote, middle class held hostage. That was my first viral piece, middle class held hostage. What did I mean by that? In as much as we do everything, we were the ones that always paid the price for everything. And one of the other articles was, assert your worth. Repeating, assert your worth. And sometimes it is difficult because it means that those who haven't yet gotten to the power within their minds, the enslaving of their minds to assert their worth, sometimes the peer pressure of the majority who still have enslaved minds will have you cower from doing what you know is right. Breaking out of an enslaved mind is what's going to take for us to get the environmental movement really moving. It's what's going to take for us to get the criminal justice movement moving as it should, the social justice movement moving as it should, ensuring that we have a state that takes care of people, meaning health care for all, paid for by the state with all our contributing taxpayer money. My monetarist isn't going to like that statement, but he knows what I mean. That is when all of this changes. And over the weekend, a good friend and supporter of Politics Done Right came out and said, in effect, he wanted to throw his hands up in the air. In effect, saying, people can't change. He came to church. My daughter was honored at the church for her work as a bridge builder, even after having 2 strokes. And they honored her. It was an impressive ceremony they had for her at the church. So, I'm a humanist, but my wife is a deacon in the church, and I said, you know what? I support them at the church whenever I have to support them at the church. And I went to the church. Pastor Sloan of the Loop, I think one of the pastors that lives up to what they say a church is supposed to do. Why I love the guy so much, because he does work within the community and do all that he's supposed to do. But anyhow, we were sitting in church with some of the guests, some of the family that came to support my daughter. Much of what the guest preacher said was right and inspiring. But one of the things that the guest preacher spoke about, faith and working on faith and not having to see proof and that sort of stuff, he turned to me and he said, Egberto, that's the problem. how do we get the American citizenry, and for that matter, the world citizenry, how do we get them to stop just taking things on faith because they like somebody or trust somebody and start taking things not on faith but on facts? To which I told him, I don't ever expect folks to change from having a certain revere for faith. What I expect us to do is make sure that those they have faith in leads them appropriately, accordingly, not to a path of their personal destruction, their personal impoverishment, but to a better place for us all. We can't change human nature in its totality, but we can change human nature sufficiently. In other words, don't expect the perfect out of humanity, because none of us are perfect, but expect that we can not yearn, but we can show people how to elect people that have their best interest at hand. And that's the first topic of the day, un-enslaving one's mind.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.